Hey, family. So, this presentation is if you are thinking about a doctoral degree. It is never too soon to start thinking about these things, but there are some things that you need to start preparing for as you are thinking about your doctoral degree. So, in this presentation, we're going to cover a couple of things. Um, One, I want to talk about the differences in the different doctoral degrees and for us to determine which degree best fits our work, our goals, and what we're really passionate about. The second thing I want to cover is how to structure your CV, kind of what it can look like, what it can be like. The third thing we're going to cover is how to utilize storytelling for your statement of purpose. And then lastly, I'll follow up with uh, some questions or just some things that we need to consider. So, the first thing we need to dive into is what doctoral degree really fits my goals and fits the vision that I'm seeing for the type of work. So, let's go through each one of those. So, first, of course, the most common one is a PhD, right? PhD is usually around 5 or 6 years of research. Um, your focus is going to be academic research and theory. And typically, your career path around that is you're wanting to go into various positions in academia. Maybe you want to be a part of research institution or organization. Um, think tanks could be one, and then there's some other creative outlets where PhDs are needed and that their work is. If you're thinking about a EDD, your focus primarily is going to be on the application of research and leadership within educational settings. Um, so your career path typically is you're thinking about you want to be in educational administration, you want to do policy making, you can be in higher education leadership. Um, so, for example, for me, I've been in higher ed for over 10 years. So I love focusing on adult learning. So EDD would make total sense for the type of focus that I would want to have, right? For demons, now the biggest thing that I will say here is yes, this can involve if you're heavily involved in church ministry, but it does not always have to. I think a lot of the work that we do is ministry, but we don't not have to think just within the four walls of the church. So you can definitely have a demon and not just be in traditional church ministry. Okay, so you're focused on practical ministry and theological reflection, right? That's the goal with your D.Min. So some career paths could be you want to be a senior pastor, some type of ministry leader. And again, I just said that does not necessarily mean you have to be in church. Because again, if we think of our work as ministry, that works as well. So pastoral care, so chaplaincy could be a part of that. And nonprofit leadership could also be a part of that. So let's talk about what these programs are structured like. So the type of expectations that you can think of when you are entering into these degree programs. So for PhD level work, your structure is going to be coursework. Then you'll have your comprehensive exams typically, and then a dissertation. Now remember, this is around original research. What are you providing to the field? Okay, so whether that's through qualitative or quantitative data, you definitely want to contribute something original to the field of study. Your expectation is high level of theoretical engagement, right? So you're going to be focused on producing new knowledge. So you'll be doing a lot of data collection, typically with your PhD, which is why it's about 5 to 6 years because you're going to need to study it, analyze it, and all of those things. So, for example, you're going to complete a dissertation on a specific theological issue or a historical event, right, that you want to focus on. There could be a community event. Again, this doesn't really necessarily have to be theological focus. If you wanted it to be around social justice, if you wanted it to be around ethics. So at Emory, we in the Laney Graduate School, we have an ethics concentration for a doctoral degree. Several of our faculty have gotten that, right? So you can be around something specific, but you're contributing something to the field, right? For EDD, your expectation could be you're going to do coursework, but you will also have applied research. You'll have a project typically or a dissertation. It just depends on the program. And so you are trying to solve real world problems in the field of education, right? So what is a problem that you're seeing that you want to address? For a D.Min, it's typically going to be coursework and a project-based thesis on a ministry practice. So remember, I said again, it does not have to necessarily be a church practice in the four walls. It can, but it can also be ministry outside of that, right? So let's say if you have a ministry where you are focused on uh, single mothers and resources, and how do we help single mothers in that regard, to bettering themselves, bettering the lives of their children, and looking at single mothers holistically. What could be a ministry aspect around that, right? So just thinking about what issues that you're seeing um, within a ministry type context that you want to be able to focus and zone in on. For all doctoral applications, this is typically what you're going to have to provide. Number one is statement of purpose. And we're going to get into that in just a few moments. The other is a research proposal and a writing sample. So typically a research proposal will happen with PhDs more so. But depending on the program, so every program is different, you might have to do a research proposal for an EDD or a D.Min. So just make sure you're reading the qualifications and the requirements for the program that you're thinking about. The other thing you're going to have to do is have a CV or a resume. Typically for doctoral work, though, it will be a CV. You need letters of recommendation. Normally, it's around 3 of those. And then your transcripts for every school that you have attended. So let's start with a CV breakdown. Okay, what should that look like? What should it comprise? So here are the main areas that you're probably going to have on your CV: your contact information, education, your research experience, professional experience, your skills, service and leadership positions that you've held, and any certifications that you might have. So let's break down the different sections. Education is just like it would be on your resume, right? So you want to place your education in descending order. However, the difference between how you're placing your education on your CV than your resume, you don't really have to put your GPA unless you just feel led to. Um, but for your CV, I recommend it. I recommend that you have your GPA on there, as well as your concentration and or a thesis title. So if you are an MTS student, you will be putting your thesis. If you are an MDiv student, put what your concentration was that you mainly focused on. If that was coming through a womanist lens, do that. So if it was womanist pedagogy, let's say that was your focus, then you would want to write that. So you want to put what your concentrated work has been in. And if you do have a thesis, you can put that there as well. The other piece to this is research interests and publications. Now, your research interests, to me, you need to place areas that you're interested in researching, right? They need to see, like, these are the areas that I want to explore. But I also think some of these interests should be reflected in a lot of your coursework and your professional experience already. So it can be both and. It can be things you're interested in, but also things you've already started exploring already. Um, don't stress if you don't have publications. You don't have to, and I'll explain that in a few moments on a couple of slides. But if you do have publications, this is where you could put it. So even if it was for, let's say, I know like there's an online publication around social justice called The Sojourner. Let's say you submitted in something and it was published on the website. That counts. So make sure you put that. Any type of writing experience that you've had talking about a topic, that's what we want to put in the publication section. If you have academic awards or honors and fellowship, I would say, especially in your master's level um, uh, areas and degrees, we want to kind of focus in on that a little bit. You can put some things from your undergrad if it supports the area that you really want to research, right? So you can do that. That's totally fine if it supports it. The way that this student did it, I really like it because it lists the year they got it and they just list what it was. So if it was an academic award, if you got something that you were awarded for Honors Day here at Candler, you need to put it on your resume. Some of you all already have other master's degrees and doctoral degrees. So if you have anything from those programs, place it here. If you've done any type of fellowship, so for example, if you were a CDC fellow, right? You could put it here, just to highlight the diversity of your scholarship. All right. So remember earlier I said don't stress if you don't have publications. That's okay. This is why I say that's okay. So here, I love how the student structured this. This is an actual student's CV. One, they highlighted major papers. This is why it's important that you keep up with all of your papers that you do here at Candler. Okay. Um, you don't have to list all of them, but major papers, I would say like probably the end of like the semester type papers. So those are heavily researched papers. And especially if it leans into what you're thinking you want your doctoral work to be around, we need to have that listed. If you've done any form of lectures, please do that. Even let's say it was, if you feel like, oh, well, all I did was put together a presentation for a community day at my church, just talking about X, Y, and Z. To me, that counts. That's community engagement, community education around a topic. If it's not a lecture, say for instance, you have a D.Min, or excuse me, you want to go out for a D.Min, it would be totally appropriate for you to list Bible studies that you have potentially crafted and curated, because that's instructional design, right? That's a curriculum. So if y'all did a 4-week Bible study around social justice in the Bible, and you had to come up with those lessons, put it there. Look at how these are listed. So I love that it's the major paper. It says what course it was a part of, or where it was given, if it was a lecture, and it lists that in detail. So just kind of pay attention. I think this is a beautiful way to articulate your papers and your lectures. Then the other piece is presentations. So if you presented at a conference before, um, if you, whether it was here at Candler or beyond it, this is a good place to put that. So brag on yourself. And I know sometimes that can be a little bit hard, especially as seminarians. We do not like bragging on ourselves and talking about ourselves, but really it's not bragging if you can back it up, right? This is just saying this is the work that I've done um, around these topics and around this particular area of interest. Okay. So here, these to the left, that's optional. So you don't have to do that. This student just chose to structure it in that way. The next biggest piece I would say is your research experience. So if you are a research assistant here at Candler, that needs to go be listed. I kind of leave it up to the student if they kind of want to delineate research versus professional experience. That's totally fine. Or you can include it all together. So it's kind of a stylistic choice. Um, but for your professional experience, this student, because this CV was about 7 pages, decided to just list what they did and not give the detail. I would say if your CV is a little bit thinner, we can probably list some of the duties that you had at these places, especially if they support and show what you want to get your doctorate in, right? So we can keep playing with that. I'm here to assist you to kind of figure that piece out. All right, so we get to the fun part. So, statement of purpose is where you can really be on display, right? So, your CV is pretty clinical, right? It's listing all the things you've done academically, right? All the things you've done leadership wise, all of that. Um, but your statement of purpose is your story. And so, I like to utilize storytelling when it comes to telling your story. I know in seminary we write academically, right? So it's pretty clinical, but I strongly feel there is a creative writing element that should always come into play with our writing, and especially when we're telling our story. So here's some things to consider. The first is when you are writing your statement of purpose is the opening. Encapsulate your audience from the beginning. Make them want to hang on, right? So start with a compelling anecdote or a personal experience or question that draws the reader in. So let's say if you're starting with a personal story, me and my mother went to the store. That's what happened, right? I mean, that's cool. But it could also feel different in this way. Um, I'll never forget the day my life completely changed, and it all started with a grocery store run with my mother, and then going into what the story is. Like, okay, what happened, right? You want your audience, and in this situation, is going to be the admissions office, to be immediately captivated to figure out, okay, well, what happened, right? So your opening is very critical. Get them by the very first line. Okay. The second piece is the middle of your statement of purpose. So you want to build off the narrative that you set off in the opening, right? You want to highlight some key challenges, insights, or turning points in your journey. What was a defining moment? I tell students, think about the defining moment that got you right here, that you said, I want to apply for a doctoral degree and study this thing. What was that moment? Did it come from your childhood? Did it come from being a teenager? Did it come from a situation that happened in your church? Did it come from a situation that happened with a friend? What was the moment? And then start crafting that narrative. Highlight the challenges and the insights, the turning points that you had in your journey. Maybe you thought one way, but then coming to seminary changed your mind, and now you're thinking this way, and you want to explore that more, right? But connect these experiences to the program. And on here it says or faculty. I say both. I probably should have put both. You want to highlight some faculty members that you want to work with, right? So that you see the work that they're doing and you want to be able to learn from them. It just shows you kind of done your homework, you've done your research. So you're tying your personal experience, what got you to this moment, and saying, this is why I think this degree is very critical and important for me. And for your conclusion, you want to paint a vision of your future. So, what's the goal? And how do you think this program is going to help you reach that goal? Right? What's your passion for this profession, for this field? Like, what does that look like for you? Where are you headed with this? How are you going to contribute this back to the community? In what ways is it going to enhance or help in the field of academia or in the theological ministry context? Right? What does that look like? So, some tips: be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to tell somebody else's story, tell your story. Don't make it generic, be specific. This is you. You got to be an expert in you, right? You want to be very specific, right? So, again, give us concrete examples, give us a concrete story that we can build off of. Align it with the program value, right? So the programs you're applying for, okay, this is cool. This was the experience. How does that align with this particular program that I'm looking at? Use very active language. Keep the reader engaged. Use action verbs. Be very vivid in your details. So don't just say something happened. What was happening in that moment? What did it feel like? What did it taste like? What did it smell like? Right? Again, this is all creative writing. This is what we do in storytelling. And then make sure you just edit for clarity. Make sure it's clear and concise. Make sure it flows well. Sometimes students get stuck on connecting ideas. But that's what your experience and degree here at Candler is also helping you do, not just the research piece, but how to make it make sense, right? That it all connects and it flows together. So I want to play a couple of examples to give you. So this first example is from the movie Freedom Writers. And I want you to listen to how this character describes the worst summer of his life. And I want you to listen to the vivid detail, the language behind how he's articulating his story.
Miss G, can I read something from my diary?
That'd be great.
Who's he?
Man, he's been with us since freshman year, fool.
What's his name?
I don't know.
The summer was the worst summer in my short 14 years of life. It all started with a phone call. My mother was crying and begging, asking for more time, as if she were gasping for her last breath of air. She held me as tight as she could and cried. Her tears hit my shirt like bullets, and told me we were being evicted. She kept apologizing to me. I thought I have no home. I should have asked for something less expensive at Christmas. On the morning of the eviction, a hard knock on the door woke me up. The sheriff was there to do his job. I looked up at the sky, waiting for something to happen. My mother has no family to lean on, no money coming in. Why bother coming to school or getting good grades if I'm homeless? The bus stops in front of the school. I feel like throwing up. I'm wearing clothes from last year, some old shoes, and no new haircut. I kept thinking I'd get laughed at. Instead, I'm greeted by a couple of friends who were in my English class last year. And it hits me, Mrs. Gurwell, my crazy English teacher from last year, is the only person that made me think of hope. Talking with friends about last year's English and our trips, I began to feel better. I received my schedule, and the first teacher is Mrs. Gurwell in room 203. I walk into the room and feel as though all the problems in life are not so important anymore. I am home. Miss G,
Powerful
can I read
language,
something
right?
from my
So he
diary?
went from talking
That'd be great.
about the worst summer of his life and how he was homeless,
Who's he?
but ending it with
Eddie's
he
been with us
found
since freshman
home
year, fool.
at school
What's
with
that?
his teacher,
I don't
with
know.
his classmates.
The summer
How he
was the worst
started that
summer in my
was
short
this was the
14 years
worst
of life.
summer of my short 14
It all
years of
started with a
life.
phone call.
That is an incredible
My
opening
mother was
sentence because
crying
now
and
the
begging,
question is going to be, well,
asking for
what
more
happened?
time,
Why was this the worst
as if
summer?
she were gasping
Right?
for her
The way
last
he
breath of life.
describes his mother's tears as
She
bullets
held
felt
me
like
as tight as
bullets
she
hitting
could
his
and
shirt.
cried.
Very
Her
vivid,
tears hit my
creative
shirt like
language that
bullets,
encapsulates
and
you.
told
That's
me
what I
we were
want you to
being
think of as
evicted.
you're telling your
She
story.
kept apologizing
Put
to me.
us in the
I
moment. So
thought I
you
have no
felt
home.
the
I should have
emotion.
asked
You
for
were
something less
at every
expensive at
step of the
Christmas.
way with him
On the
when he
morning of the
says
eviction,
he
a
got
hard knock on the
he went
door
back to
woke me
school
up.
in the same
The
clothes,
sheriff was there to
same
do
shoes.
his
He felt like he
job.
wanted to throw up. You could feel
I
that
looked up at the
emotion
sky, waiting for
um,
something to
as he's
happen.
talking. But then he brings it
My
back
mother
home
has no
to
family to
I
lean on, no
realize that
money
I'm not
coming in.
homeless
Why
because I have
bother
a
coming
home
to
when I'm
school
with
or
these
getting good
people,
grades
right?
if
So
I'm
that's kind of the
homeless?
message in
The
that. So
bus
just
stops in
very
front of the
clear,
school.
very
I
beautiful,
feel like throwing up.
descriptive,
I'm
vivid
wearing
language.
clothes from
That's what I
last
want
year,
you to think of when you are
some old
doing your
shoes, and
statement of
no new
purpose.
haircut.
I'm gonna show you one more example.
I
This
kept
time, this
thinking
is
I'd
a
get laughed at.
speech given
Instead,
by
I'm greeted
Viola
by a
Davis
couple of
in
friends who were in my
2017
English
at the
class
Time
last year.
100 Gala.
And it hits me,
Listen to how she
Mrs. Gurwell,
structures telling this
my
story and then
crazy English teacher
connecting it
from last year,
to
is the
everybody
only
in that
person that
room.
made me
So
think
she
of
talks
hope.
about an experience she had when she was 25.
Talking with friends
And then
about
she
last
brings
year's
it back
English
to
and
the
our
people that
trips,
are in that
I
room who
began
did
to
not share
feel
that same
better.
experience but could
I received
potentially
my
relate
schedule, and the first
to the
teacher is
experience by
Mrs.
what
Gurwan,
she talks
room
about. So let's take a
203.
listen.
When I was 25, I went to Juilliard right next door. Not a very good experience, by the way. And I remember at one point, I felt like I lost my voice as an artist. I said, who am I really? What am I doing here? How am I going to be different from everyone else? So I decided to go on a cultural arts safari in Africa. I made Juilliard pay for it. And I went to the Gambia. And I went to a compound of the Mandinka tribe. And one day, there were these group of women called Kenyala who came into the compound, Mandinka women. And they were dressed in oversized clothes. And they had paint on their faces. And they carried drums. And they were shouting really, really loudly and making really funny faces. And they had calabashes filled with this dish that tasted like peanut-flavored oatmeal. And they just got louder and louder, and they passed the calabash around to everybody in the compound. And more people started yelling and screaming with them, to the point where they were falling over each other. Hundreds of people, children even. And they'd pass the calabash, plop the food in their mouths, look up to the sky, scream, scream, scream. And they'd sing this song that translated into, I did not come here for food, my stomach is full. I did not come here for food. I came for much more than that. And I was wondering who these women were. And I found out that they were actually women who were infertile. And in the Gambia, the biggest blessing you could possibly have is to be able to have a child. And these women felt like the only reason why they weren't blessed with a child is because God did not hear their wish. And so the whole point of the ritual was to make as much noise as possible so God could hear them and pour down the blessing. The beauty of that ritual was that it was actually a ritual, and actually something that they could do to get what they wanted in their lives. The beauty of that ritual was the participation. The beauty of that ritual was the people who were surrounding these women who said, you know what? God didn't hear you, did not see you. And I'm going to make sure that he does. I'm going to do my part in your life to make sure that she hears you. And that is the beauty of everybody in this room. In the words of Thomas Merton, perhaps we're stronger than we think. That everybody in this room, I'm sure at some point, has gone through something in their lives, and you've survived it. But not only did you survive it, you took that trauma, that hurt, that revelation, or whatever it was, and you used it to connect, to give, to influence, to help. And that is the beauty and the purpose of what we are here on this earth to do. So for me, I lift the glass to everyone in this room. Everyone who has decided to live a life bigger than yourself. Everyone who decided to slay those dragons and say, it's not just about me. And I applaud you. And I am honored to be in this room with you. Thank you. When I was 25,
beautiful storytelling,
I went
right?
to
She
Juilliard,
used an
right next
experience
door.
that she had at 25
Not a very good experience,
of
by the
being
way.
with the women of Gambia in this
And I remember at
beautiful
one
ritual
point,
and the
I
power
felt
she
like I
learned of
lost my
community
voice as an
and tied it
artist.
right back to the
I
people
said,
who were in
who
that
am
room,
I really?
right?
You know,
That's
what am I
beautiful
doing
storytelling.
here?
It's
You know,
taking
how am I
moments
going
of
to be
our
different
lives
from
and
everyone
making
else?
it make
So I
sense to a greater
decided
story and a
to go
greater
on a
narrative.
cultural
It's
art
our story
safari in
connected to a
Africa.
greater story.
I made
Think
Juilliard
about
pay
your
for it.
research in that way. This is my
And I went to the
story,
Gambia.
but I'm tying it to a greater story,
And I went to
a
a
communal story.
compound
Powerful.
of the...
So here's some more tips. Seek feedback as you're writing. This is probably going to be the bulk of the majority of the work you're going to do is writing this statement of purpose, because you really want to put your authentic self, right? So we got the clinical part, we got the academic part on the CV, but who are you? What shaped you? What molded you, right? So this is going to be the bulk of your work. So get as much feedback as possible. Ask mentors, ask professors, ask some of your peers to review your statement. What did it connect with you? What do you think I should change? Does it make sense? Is it concise? Is it clear? Right? Revise, right? So this is why you want to give yourself some time to work on this application. I would say at least a year to work on the application if you can, so you have time to really write and get this down and make it as concise as possible. Again, make sure as you're telling your story, how does it align with that? Why do you think this program would be the program to help you in this endeavor of this communal work and this creating a communal story that we just talked about? Make sure the language is polished. Okay. So here's some questions I think you should consider as you're writing. So if you're thinking about a PhD, what are you passionate about? Why are you passionate about this specific area of study? Remember, that goes back to that defining moment. What happened that made you passionate about this? Okay. How do you prepare to undertake doctoral research? Talk about your time here at Candler, how that has prepared you for the research process. right? Maybe you want to highlight a certain class that was incredibly formative for you. What gap in the field are you hoping to fill? So remember, PhD is original research. So what do you see that's missing to the communal story that you want to fill in the gaps with your research on? Okay. If you think about an EDD, like what leadership roles have you held that demonstrate your readiness for this program? So using for myself, for example, well, I've been in higher ed for 10 years. I work with undergraduate students, graduate students, and now I'm in theological education. And I really have a big passion about adult learning, right? From the career services piece, and I understand how a holistic approach really does help students flourish, right? So that could be something that I could think through and write about, if I was applying for EDD program. So how do you plan to apply the knowledge you gained in your EDD program to solving a real world problem that's existing, that's happening, and especially in the field of education? And how has your career led you to this point, right? So most times people getting EDDs have some form of career in education, whether that's secondary or higher education. If you're thinking about a D.Min, here's some questions I want you to reflect on. How has your ministry experience led you to seek advanced theological reflection and leadership training? Remember, this isn't just church ministry, right? We do ministry outside of the four walls. Ministry always encompasses church, but church does not always mean full. That's the only scenario for ministry. Okay. The second question: what specific issue or area of ministry are you passionate about addressing? So, what have you seen through your lived experiences, through the things you've encountered, um, from and seeing others experience? Like, what is it? What's the specific issue that you see? Three, how will this D.Min program equip you to serve your community more effectively? Right. So, again, how do I tie my story to create a greater story, which is the communal story? Right. The beautiful part about Candler is that Pitt's library has so many incredible, resourceful people. You really need to start thinking about, what is my research question? What question am I trying to answer? What problem am I trying to solve? Because if you can get that down, it'll make writing a little bit easier for you. So you want to have as much clarity around that research topic as possible. Um, so again, utilize our PITS team for that. They can help you, I promise. Okay. I am here to help you as well. So as you're writing, let's talk about it. Let's flesh it out. Um, that's my joy to do, to kind of help you edit, to rethink. I'm just one resource, but there's so many folks in the Candler community who can also assist you with this. So just know you don't have to go through this process alone. You have people who can support you. So off to the left is just upcoming events that we have in career services as a whole. And then to the right is my email and my Calendly link. And if you scan what's on the screen to the left, to the right, it will take you right to the Calendly page for you to book time with me. You can meet with me as often as you need to. My goal is that you all start thinking about this soon. I would say no later than your second year. But if you are already in your third year and you are like, I really want to go ahead and apply for this PhD, it's not impossible, but we just got a lot of work to do to get you caught up. So feel free to reach out. I'm here to assist however you all need. And I look forward to seeing where your work takes you and how you're going to contribute to the greater communal story.